On Father's Day, my millionaire son Jard asked me one question that cracked my whole world open. Dad, are you happy with the $8,000 Lauren sends you every month? I looked around my freezing apartment, at the peeling paint, and the space heater struggling against the Chicago wind. And I told him the truth. Son, the church food pantry is keeping me alive these days. That's when his wife walked through the door, and I watched panic flash across her face before she buried it under a river of fake tears. I'm Oscar Blake, 72 years old. 40 years a corporate auditor, the kind of man who spent his career tracking missing money through mountains of paperwork. You'd think a man like that would retire comfortable. Life doesn't work that way. It started 10 years ago when my wife Diane died. The medical bills gutted us. I sold our house, drained every dime I had left to finish paying for Jard's college and his first startup. That's what a father does, you sacrifice so your child can fly. Jard flew. He built a software empire and became a millionaire before 35. I ended up in a drafty apartment on a forgotten block, wearing 2 sweaters indoors just to stop my hands from shaking. Walking 6 blocks twice a week to stand in line at the food pantry for canned soup and powdered milk. I never complained. Jard always said he'd set up a trust, that his wife Lauren was managing it, making sure I was taken care of. I assumed it was a safety net. I never saw a dime and I was too proud to ask. But an auditor's mind never retires. That Father's Day, when Jard showed up unannounced in his cashmere coat and saw my apartment, his face went white. "The condo," he stammered. "Lauren said she moved you into a luxury senior facility downtown. She sends me photos." I told him gently there was no condo. There never had been. He pulled out his phone, panicking. "She sends you $8,000 a month, Dad. Are you happy there?" The number hit the freezing air like a physical weight. $96,000 a year. Enough to change everything, and I hadn't seen a cent. Before he could process it, Lauren walked in 36, wrapped in a white designer coat that cost more than my rent, carrying the scent of perfume that swallowed the mustiness of my apartment hole. The second she saw Jard standing there, I caught it, pure panic gone in a blink. Replaced by a performance of grief, so total it would have fooled anyone who hadn't spent 40 years reading liars for a living. "Your poor broken mind, Oscar," she sobbed, turning to Jard. "I've been sending the money every month, I swear it." But his dementia, he wanders, he hides things, he thinks people are stealing from him. I stood there, stunned by the audacity. I'd never been diagnosed with anything. My mind had never been sharper. But she spun the lie with such conviction that I watched my son's anger curdle into heartbroken concern. Concern for me, the sick old man losing his grip on reality. Then Jard's phone rang. The board, he stepped into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind him. The instant that latch clicked, Lauren's tears vanished like a switch had been thrown. She crossed the room, backed me against the counter, and hissed into my face. "Play along, old man. Act confused. If you say one more word, I'll have you declared incompetent by Tuesday. I have doctors on payroll who'll sign whatever I tell them to sign. You'll rot in a psychiatric ward until you forget your own name." She looked at my stooped shoulders and worn clothes and saw a helpless old man. She forgot exactly who she was talking to. I gave her nothing, no argument, no outburst, just silence, my shoulders slumping, the light draining out of my eyes. An auditor learns early. Predators get careless when you don't react. When Jard came back, I asked him in a trembling voice if it was dinner time, if his mother was coming home. Hearing me ask for Diane, gone 10 years, broke him completely. Lauren stood behind him, rubbing his back, smirking at me over his shoulder. She thought she'd won. The moment they left and the building went quiet, the tremor in my hands stopped. My spine straightened. I sat down at my kitchen table, pushed the cold soup aside, and started organizing the data in my head. $96,000 a year vanishing. A woman dressed like royalty, a son who was completely blind. I didn't need to scream. I needed a paper trail. The next morning, I put on the one good wool coat I still owned and walked into the bank. Beverly, the branch manager, had known me 3 years and never once treated me like a fool. I told her I needed a forensic review of my trust account, and I watched her expression sharpen as she pulled up the ledger. The first thing we found was almost a relief: $8,000, wired in like clockwork every month, exactly as Jard promised. My son hadn't lied. but less than 48 hours after each deposit landed, an automated sweep pulled $7,800 right back out, leaving exactly $200 behind, just enough that the account never triggered a dormant balance warning. Just enough to keep me alive on soup while the rest disappeared. I asked Beverly to trace the destination. The money was routing to a holding company on the East Coast, a shell company registered under the name L Prime Holdings. I almost laughed. Lauren had named it after herself. She was so certain no one would ever check. I asked Beverly not to freeze anything yet. If I cut off the money now, she'd know she was caught and destroy the evidence. I needed to follow the thread first. At the public library, I pulled the incorporation records. Lauren was listed as sole managing director of L Prime Holdings. I cross-referenced the routing number with Florida property records and found it. A beachfront estate in Miami, mortgage and taxes totaling exactly $7,800 a month, every stolen penny. Funneled straight into paradise. And she wasn't the one living there. A quick search of her parents' social media told me who was. Anthony and Barbara, sipping champagne on a sun-drenched balcony, thanking their wonderful daughter for their dream retirement, funded entirely by the money that was supposed to keep me from freezing to death. That was the moment my grief turned into something colder and far more precise. I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to take her whole world apart. Within days, Lauren noticed I wasn't behaving like a man losing his mind. She hired a private investigator who photographed me walking into the bank, sitting in Beverly's office, digging through property records at the library. When she saw those photos, she understood exactly what I used to be, and she panicked. She moved fast, hiring an aggressive attorney named Pierce to draft an emergency medical power of attorney, a legal weapon to have me declared incompetent, locked away, silenced for good. She and Pierce showed up at my door with the papers already drawn, put Jard on speakerphone to guilt me into compliance, and then the moment the call ended, Lauren threatened me outright. Sign. Or she'd have me committed by morning. I signed. I let my hand shake, let her believe she'd broken me. But as I read through the document before signing, because a lifetime of auditing teaches you the devil always hides in the fine print, I found it. A standard boilerplate clause, copied carelessly into the paperwork, before any medical power of attorney could take legal effect. A full forensic audit of the Associated Family Trust had to be triggered by the primary accounting firm. Jard's accounting firm, the same ruthless, meticulous team that handled his entire company's books. Lauren thought she was silencing me. She was actually pulling the pin on her own grenade. 2 days later, that document hit Jard's corporate legal system, and the automated audit clause fired exactly as written. A young accountant pulled my trust ledger, expecting nothing more than a boring retirement account. Instead, he found the sweep, the shell company, the Florida property, and escalated it straight up the chain in total secrecy. While Lauren strutted around planning her husband's IPO gala, an entire forensic team was quietly building an airtight case against her, and she had no idea. That same week, I called Wallace, the company's CFO, a man who treated the ledgers like sacred ground. I gave him the routing numbers, the shell company name, the Miami address, everything. He confirmed what I already knew and agreed to help me get into the gala Lauren had locked down with private security, specifically to keep me out. I spent the last of my emergency savings, $1,200 I'd hoarded for years, on a tailored charcoal suit. Not for vanity, for armor. Standing in front of that mirror, I stopped seeing a broken old man and started seeing the auditor who'd spent 40 years taking down men far more dangerous than Lauren. Saturday night, Wallace met me at the service entrance and walked me straight past security using his executive credentials. I slipped into the ballroom in the shadows while my son stood at the podium, mid-speech, dedicating the entire night to my sacrifice, with Lauren standing beside him, wiping away a fake tear, using my supposed illness to make herself look like a saint. That's when I stepped out of the dark and started walking down the center aisle. The room noticed before Jard did a rustle, a hush, heads turning. Then Jard looked up and saw me standing there in a suit, not a wheelchair, not confused, not fading. He froze mid-sentence. Lauren turned to see what had stolen his attention, and the moment her eyes met mine, Every drop of color drained from her face. Her champagne glass shook so hard it spilled down the front of her gown. I walked straight past her parents without a glance, climbed the stage steps, and stood beside my son. I didn't raise my voice. I put my hand over the microphone just long enough to steady it, then handed him the folder, the entire forensic audit, stamped and verified by his own CFO. I told him I loved him, that I was proud of him, and that the man draining his family trust dry was standing in the front row in an emerald gown. Jard opened the folder in front of 400 witnesses and the cameras of half the city's press. Page by page, the truth unfolded, the deposits, the sweeps, the shell company bearing her name, the Miami estate, the photos of her parents celebrating a life bought with my survival money. I watched my son's face go from confusion to horror, to a cold, final kind of fury. Lauren rushed the stage, sobbing, grabbing for the folder, insisting it was an investment strategy, that she was going to move me to Florida eventually, that she did it all for the family. Jard looked at her the way you look at a stranger. He didn't yell. He simply raised his hand, and 2 security men stepped forward and walked her out through the same doors she'd once used to lock me away, while the cameras caught every second of it. Backstage afterward, Jard wept, apologized, begged me to move into his penthouse with private chefs and round-the-clock care. I told him no. I didn't want a gilded cage built on guilt. I wanted my independence, and for the first time in years, we talked as equals instead of a grieving son and a fading old man. The legal fallout was swift. Jard's lawyers froze every account tied to L Prime Holdings within days. The Miami estate was seized and liquidated. Anthony and Barbara were evicted from the life they never earned. Lauren faced embezzlement and forgery charges, lost the marriage, the money, and every ounce of the status she'd valued more than anything else. Every stolen dollar came back to my trust. I didn't buy a mansion. I bought a modest brick house with a fireplace and thick windows that keep the Chicago wind exactly where it belongs, outside. Jard visits every Sunday now, not out of guilt, but because he wants to. And on Tuesday mornings, I still walk to that same church, not for a handout anymore, but to volunteer, serving soup to people who need it the way I once did. The lesson I carry with me is simple. Power doesn't come from noise or money or a beautiful face. It comes from patience, from quiet observation, and from never letting anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter. People driven by greed will always underestimate the ones who move in silence. Don't let them. If this story meant something to you, tell me where you're watching from, and share the moment in your own life when you finally stopped staying quiet.